Hello, night seekers, and welcome to Sleepy Shadows, your quiet corner of the night, where whispers replace the noise of the world. Before you fall asleep tonight, these stories found you for a reason. Some stories wait in the dark for someone who needs them. Maybe tonight, that someone is you. Wherever you're listening from, I'm truly glad you're here. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? If these stories help you unwind, subscribe, so you always have a place to return to. Now, take a slow breath in and gently exhale. Close your eyes, and let's drift into the shadows. When I was a child, I used to sleepwalk a lot. It wasn't something that happened once in a while. It happened often enough that my family grew used to checking my bed in the middle of the night, just to make sure I was still in it. We lived in a rough neighborhood back then, the kind of place where sirens were common and people kept their porch lights on until morning. It wasn't the safest area, especially for a kid to be wandering around alone at night. But that's exactly what I would do without even knowing it. Many nights, I would wake up outside. Sometimes I'd find myself standing in the yard. Other times, I would be on the sidewalk in front of our house. Once, I even woke up halfway down the block, barefoot and confused. I would stand there in the cold night air, trying to understand how I got there. My mind would feel foggy, like I had just stepped out of a dream but hadn't fully returned to reality. The street would be quiet, lit only by a few dim streetlights. Every shadow looked bigger than it really was. Every small sound made my heart jump. Then I would slowly walk back home. The worst part was always seeing the front door wide open. Somehow, every time I sleepwalked outside, I left the door open behind me. The dark hallway inside would look endless, like something out of a horror movie. I would stand there at the entrance, staring into the darkness, afraid to step in. As a child, you don't fully understand danger, but you feel it deep in your stomach. I knew that leaving the door open in our neighborhood was not safe. Anyone could have walked in. Anyone could have been inside waiting. I would gather my courage, step inside, and quickly close and lock the door. Then I would tiptoe back to my bedroom, still shaken, and crawl into bed. Most of the time, I didn't even tell my mom the next morning because I didn't fully understand what had happened myself. Over time, these strange nights became part of my childhood. They were scary, but they felt almost normal. However, one night changed everything. I was about 9 years old. It was late, and the house was quiet. I don't remember going to sleep that night, but I remember waking up. It felt slow, like I was coming out of deep water. My eyes opened, but my body felt heavy and slow to move. The first thing I noticed was that my bedroom curtains were pulled wide open. That immediately felt wrong. I always slept with them closed. I didn't like seeing outside at night. I preferred complete darkness. The pale glow from the streetlight poured into my room. It made everything look strange. My dresser cast a long shadow across the floor. My toys looked like dark shapes instead of familiar objects. The room didn't feel like my room anymore. It felt different, almost unreal. Then I realized I wasn't in my bed. I was standing at the window. I don't remember walking there. I don't remember touching the curtains. But there I was, staring out into the street. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. The neighborhood looked quiet. The houses across from ours were dark. No cars were moving. Everything seemed still. Then my eyes focused. There was a man standing outside my window. He was very large. Even as a child, I could tell he was much bigger than most men I had seen. What made him even more disturbing was that he had no hair at all. No hair on his head, no eyebrows. Nothing. His skin looked pale under the streetlight, almost glowing in the darkness. He was staring directly at me. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. My mind was still trying to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. I wondered if I was dreaming. I had just woken up. Maybe this wasn't real. Maybe my imagination was playing tricks on me. But then he slowly stepped closer to the window. My heart started pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears. He leaned forward slightly, squinting like he was trying to understand what he was looking at. His face moved closer to the glass. I could see more details now. His wide eyes. The smooth skin where eyebrows should have been. The confused expression on his face. That was the moment I fully woke up. The fear hit me all at once. This was not a dream. There was a grown man outside my bedroom window in the middle of the night, staring at me. I froze. I couldn't move. My body felt stuck. My throat felt tight. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out at first. He took another small step closer, and then something inside me broke free. I screamed as loud as I could. It wasn't a normal scream. It was wild and desperate. The sound came from deep inside me, louder than I knew I was capable of. I kept screaming and screaming. My body shook so badly that I could barely stand, and I was so terrified that I completely lost control and wet myself. I didn't care. Fear had taken over everything. The man's expression changed instantly. The confusion on his face turned into shock. Then it turned into panic. He clearly did not expect that reaction. He let out a high-pitched scream of his own, which sounded strange and almost unreal coming from someone so big. He stumbled backward like he had been hit by something. Then he did something I will never forget. He started moving in a strange zigzag pattern, ducking and rolling as if someone was shooting at him. He dropped low, popped back up, and ran down the street in a frantic, awkward way. It looked like he was trying to dodge invisible bullets. It was chaotic and bizarre. I kept screaming until my throat hurt. Within seconds, I heard my mom running down the hallway. She rushed into my room and turned on the light. I was shaking, crying, and pointing at the window. I tried to explain what happened, but my words were broken. I told her there was a man outside. I told her he was right there, staring at me. She looked out the window, but the street was empty. Because of my history with sleepwalking, she thought I might have been dreaming. She tried to calm me down and said it was probably a nightmare. She checked the doors and windows, then held me until I stopped shaking. Even though she tried to comfort me, I could tell she wasn't fully convinced. But the next morning proved I wasn't imagining it. When we went outside, we found a screwdriver lying on the front porch. It didn't belong to us. The handle looked old and worn. There were fresh marks around the door frame. The area near the door handle had visible damage, like someone had tried to force it open. My mom went quiet when she saw that. She didn't say anything about nightmares after that. The police were called. They asked questions and looked at the damage. They took the screwdriver, or they checked around the house and spoke to neighbors. Nothing else was missing, but it was clear someone had tried to break in. Whether it was the same man I saw, I can't say for sure, but the timing felt too close to ignore. After that night, things changed in our house. My mom installed stronger locks. She made sure every window was secured before bed. She even added small alarms to the doors. For weeks, I could barely sleep. Every small noise made me sit up in bed. But if the house made a creaking sound, I felt my heart race. I kept my curtains tightly closed every single night. Strangely, my sleepwalking stopped not long after that. I never woke up outside again. It was as if my brain understood that it wasn't safe. The fear must have been strong enough to break the habit. As I grew older, the memory stayed with me. For a long time, it scared me deeply. I could still picture his face clearly. The smooth, hairless skin, the wide, confused eyes, or the way his expression changed when I started screaming. But something else happened over time. The fear slowly mixed with disbelief. The way he ran away became almost unbelievable in my mind. The zigzagging, the ducking and rolling, the high-pitched scream. It was so dramatic that it almost felt like a scene from a movie. Now, when I tell the story, I still feel a small chill at first. My heart beats faster when I describe standing at the window and seeing him. But then I remember how he reacted. I remember how this large, intimidating figure completely lost control because of a screaming 9-year-old. And sometimes I laugh. Not because it wasn't serious. It was. Things could have ended very differently. But there is something strangely powerful about knowing that in one of the scariest moments of my life, I found my voice. I didn't stay silent. I didn't stay frozen forever. My scream was loud enough to send a grown man running down the street in panic. Even now, years later, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and glance toward the window. Old habits stay with you. But instead of feeling helpless, I feel strong. That night could have been a tragedy. Instead, it became a story of survival. I will never forget the look on his face when he realized I was fully awake and screaming. It was the look of someone who had made a terrible mistake. And I will never forget the strange sight of him running down the street, ducking and dodging as if escaping something invisible. That night changed me. It made me more aware. It made my family more careful. It ended my sleepwalking. And it gave me a story that still feels unreal, even though I lived it. Somewhere out there, that man might remember that night too. Maybe he remembers the house he tried to enter. Maybe he remembers the child who suddenly screamed and scared him away. I'll never know his side of the story. But I know mine. And I know that sometimes, even in your most vulnerable moment, your voice can be stronger than you think. It wasn't really hiking. It was more like car camping. But we were so far out that it felt like we had left the world behind. We were deep in the middle of nowhere on public land in Colorado, far away from towns, houses, and highways. To get there, we drove for almost an hour and a half down a rough Forest Service road. The road twisted through trees and open stretches of land, and the farther we went, the quieter everything became. We didn't see a single other vehicle the entire time. And no headlights in the distance, no dust trails behind us, nothing. It felt isolated in a way that was exciting at first. The area was so open that if a car had been coming down that road, we would have seen the headlights from miles away. Sound carried easily out there, too. Even the faint hum of an engine would stand out against the quiet of nature. It wasn't the kind of place where someone could just sneak up without being noticed. Or at least that's what we believed at the time. But there were 8 of us in total, spread across 3 cars, 3 guys and 5 girls, all close friends. We had done trips like this before, and we were comfortable with each other. The plan was simple. Set up camp, cook dinner, hang out for a while, and then sleep under the stars. The weather was clear, and as the sun started to dip lower, the sky turned shades of orange and pink. It felt peaceful, safe. We parked our cars about 30 yards away from where we set up our fire and tents. Close enough to walk to easily, but far enough that the noise and light from camp wouldn't reflect off the cars. The guys were focused on cooking dinner, while the rest of us gathered wood, set up chairs, and talked. We laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed the quiet that you only get when you're truly away from civilization. After we finished eating, we cleaned everything up carefully. We didn't want to attract animals, so we packed away food and trash properly. It was getting darker by the minute, that deep blue stage before full night sets in. someone suggested we grab a few things from the cars before heading into our tents for the night. It was supposed to be a quick walk. As we approached the vehicles, one of us noticed something strange. There was a faint hissing sound in the air. At first, it blended into the wind, barely noticeable. But the closer we got, the clearer it became. One of the front tires was completely flat. We thought it was weird, but maybe it was bad luck. Maybe we had hit something sharp on the road coming in. Then someone else checked the second car. Same thing. Front right tire, completely slashed. By the time we reached the third car, our stomachs had already dropped. The front right tire on that one was flat, too. Not just flat, but clearly cut. Each tire had a clean slice along the same spot on the sidewall. It didn't look like normal road damage. It looked intentional. For a few seconds, no one spoke. We just stared at the damage, trying to process it. Someone nervously laughed and said maybe it was a prank. But who would prank us out here? We hadn't seen anyone. There were no other cars, no signs of other campers nearby. The reality settled in quickly. This wasn't random. All 3 cars, the exact same tire, the exact same type of cut. It looked like someone had used something sharp, like a box cutter or a knife, and deliberately slashed them, where the mood shifted instantly from relaxed to terrified. We were far from help. There was no cell service out there, no quick way to call anyone. Darkness was fully setting in now, and the forest around us felt different. What had felt peaceful just minutes earlier now felt threatening. The scariest part wasn't just the damage, it was the thought behind it. Someone had to have done this while we were sitting by the fire. That meant someone had been close enough to see us, to watch us, or without us noticing. The idea made my skin crawl. All of us were shaken, but a couple of people were clearly panicking. You could see it in their faces. Wide eyes, shallow breathing, constantly looking over their shoulders. Every shadow between the trees looked like it might be hiding someone. The guys had been together the whole time cooking, and the rest of us had stayed near the fire. No one had wandered off alone. These were my closest friends, and the idea that any of them would fake something like this didn't even make sense. It would have been completely out of character, and besides, we had all been in sight of each other. We listened carefully. The wind moved through the trees. A branch cracked somewhere in the distance. Every small sound made us tense up. If someone had slashed our tires, they had done it quietly. A soft hissing sound from a tire losing air can easily disappear into the background noise of nature. We quickly realized we didn't have the luxury of staying there to figure it out. Thankfully, each car had a spare tire. We moved fast. One of the guys had a gun, and he stood watch while the others changed the tires. No one said it directly, but we were all thinking the same thing. If someone was out there watching us, we were exposed. Changing one tire in daylight is simple. Changing 3 in near darkness while your nerves are shot is something else entirely. Hands were shaking. Tools were dropped. Every few seconds, someone would stop and scan the tree line. It felt like we were being hunted, even though we couldn't see anyone. As soon as the spare tires were on, we packed up as quickly as possible. There was no discussion about staying the night anymore. The camping trip was over. We just wanted to get out of there. Driving back down that long Forest Service road felt endless. Every bump in the road made us nervous about the spare tires, where the darkness seemed thicker than before. No one played music, no one joked around. We were all quiet, replaying the same question in our heads. Who did this? When we finally reached the highway and got cell service back, we called the local authorities and reported what happened. We explained exactly where we had been, which Forest Service road we were on, and gave them the coordinates. They listened, took notes, and told us it was good that we had left, whereas there wasn't much they could do in the moment. Out there, Without witnesses or evidence beyond the damaged tires, it would be almost impossible to find whoever did it. They advised us to be careful in remote areas like that. That night, after I got home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined someone standing just beyond the firelight, watching us laugh and eat dinner. I imagined them crouched near the cars, quietly cutting the tires one by one. The thought made me feel sick. What if we hadn't noticed until the morning? What if all 3 cars had been completely undrivable by then? What if the spare tires hadn't been usable? We could have been stranded for hours, maybe longer, with no way to call for help. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. Not about being attacked directly, but about being watched. That feeling of not knowing who was out there, or what they wanted. It's the uncertainty that stays with me. On the fact that someone made a deliberate choice to disable our cars while we were sitting just a short distance away. We later explained everything clearly to people who had questions. The area was public land, not private property. It was a marked road with dispersed camping allowed. We had camped there before without any issues. Our cars were parked about 30 yards from the fire and tents. A vehicle driving down that road would have been obvious. Headlights would have lit up the trees, but the sound would have carried. The cuts in the tires were too precise to be caused by something in the road. They were all in the exact same spot on the sidewall. It wasn't random damage. It was intentional. To this day, I don't know who did it or why. Maybe it was someone trying to scare us. Maybe it was someone hoping to strand us. Maybe it was just a person who enjoys causing fear. What I do know is that the experience changed the way I see remote places. I still love nature. I still love camping. But I no longer assume that isolation means safety. Being far from people also means being far from help. Sometimes, when I think about that night, I feel the same wave of nausea I felt standing next to those cars. Just the thought that someone was probably out there, close enough to hear our voices, close enough to see our faces, watching us without being seen. That feeling has never fully gone away. I went camping alone in a valley that weekend. One of those places where your phone turns into a useless brick the moment you drive too far in. No signal, no bars, no way to reach anyone unless you physically got back to the road. I actually liked that part. That was the whole reason I went out there. I wanted quiet, distance, and a few days where the world couldn't interrupt me. The valley itself was wide and calm, but surrounded by low mountains that made the sun disappear earlier than you expected. A river ran along one side, slow but loud enough that you could hear it even when you weren't right next to it. The air smelled like wet earth and pine needles, and everything felt still in that way that only remote places feel still. Not peaceful exactly, just removed. I stayed out on a trail longer than I planned. Time slipped away faster than I realized, and before I knew it, the light had started to fade. When the shadows stretched across the ground, and the temperature dropped just enough to remind me I was out there alone. I was heading back toward my truck when I ran into a local guy walking the opposite direction. He looked normal enough. Middle-aged, friendly face, relaxed posture. He nodded at me like people do out there. The kind of nod that means you both understand you're far from anywhere, and that makes you part of the same unofficial group. We talked for a minute about the trail, the weather, and how quiet everything was. When I mentioned I was looking for a place to camp for the night, he offered to show me a spot he said locals used sometimes. He explained that it was close to the road and the river, but hidden well enough that you wouldn't notice it unless you knew it was there. That sounded perfect to me. I followed him for a short walk, and sure enough, he pointed out a clearing that blended into the landscape almost too well. From the road, you'd never know it existed. I thanked him, and he headed off without much more conversation. Nothing about the interaction felt strange. If anything, it made me feel a little more comfortable knowing someone else knew the area. I set up my camp as the last light disappeared. I started a fire, cracked open a few beers, and leaned back against my truck. I played my friend's comedy podcast through a small speaker, but laughing louder than I probably should have for someone camping alone in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't exactly subtle. The fire was bright, the sound carried, and anyone nearby would have known exactly where I was. Eventually, the cold crept in, and exhaustion hit me all at once. I looked at my tent still packed in the back of the truck and decided I didn't feel like setting it up in the dark. Instead, I climbed into the back of my truck under the topper, surrounded by my gear. It felt easier, and honestly, safer, even if I didn't think much about that at the time. The night passed quietly. No strange sounds, no footsteps, no voices. Just the river and the occasional snap of wood from the dying fire. I slept deeper than I expected. When I woke up the next morning, the valley looked completely different in the daylight. The sun filtered through the trees, and mist hovered just above the ground near the river. I climbed out of the truck, stretched, and started another fire. I cracked open a beer, because that was just the kind of trip it was, and began making breakfast. That's when I noticed him. At first, I thought it was just movement from the trees or a shadow shifting in the light. But then I realized there was a man standing at the edge of my camp. Not close, but close enough that he had clearly been watching for a while. He started moving toward me slowly. What immediately stood out wasn't just his appearance, but the way he moved. So he never looked directly at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the ground or off to the side, like I wasn't really there, even though he was clearly aware of me. He looked homeless. His beard was long and matted, hanging down his chest in uneven clumps. His clothes were layered and dirty, and tied all over them were plastic grocery bags. Not just a few, but dozens, maybe more. They were knotted onto his sleeves, his waist, even around his legs. Every step he took made them rustle softly. Trying to keep things calm, I made a comment about how nice the morning was. Something neutral, something friendly. He didn't respond. Not a word, not even a glance. I offered him breakfast. Still nothing. He started pacing around the perimeter of my camp. Never crossing into it, but never leaving either. Just circling slowly, back turned to me half the time, bags whispering with every movement. I offered him a beer, thinking maybe that would break the tension or at least get a response. Instead, he turned his back fully to me and wandered a few steps away, then stopped. He just stood there, facing away, not leaving, not acknowledging me. That was the moment when the situation shifted in my head. Something about it felt wrong. Not aggressive exactly, but unpredictable. Like there were no social rules in play anymore. No signals I could read. I was very aware of the fact that I was alone, with no cell service, and no one else around. I made sure my bear spray and my buck knife were within easy reach. My heart was beating faster now, and every sound seemed louder. I gave him one last chance. I told him, clearly and firmly, that he needed to either acknowledge me or leave immediately. I didn't yell, but I didn't hide the threat either. I wanted him to know I wasn't going to just stand there and let this continue. He ignored me completely. That was enough. I grabbed the bear spray and took a few steps toward him, holding it up so there was no doubt I was serious. I didn't rush him. I didn't scream. I just closed the distance. That finally worked. He slouched away without a word, disappearing back toward the trees and the river, plastic bags rustling until the sound faded into nothing. I didn't wait to see if he'd come back. I threw everything into my truck as fast as I could, barely bothering to pack properly. The fire was put out quickly, breakfast forgotten. Within minutes, I was driving away from that spot, not stopping until the valley was far behind me. Even now, what sticks with me the most isn't what happened in the morning. It's what might have happened during the night. I had been loud. I had been visible. Anyone nearby would have known exactly where I was. And the thought that he might have been there in the dark, watching, while I slept just a few feet away inside my truck, still makes my skin crawl. I think about how different things could have been if I'd been in a tent instead. Thin fabric. No barrier. No sense of separation at all. For once, I'm grateful for my laziness. I have had several dreams like the one I'm about to describe. Not similar in feeling, but similar in structure, as if my mind kept returning to the same place again and again. But this one stood apart. This one followed me for years, and even now, long after it stopped, it still carries weight. It still feels unfinished. I've been a caver in Florida for most of my life. I started when I was about 6 years old, tagging along with my father and older brother. By the time I was a teenager, I had already been inside more caves than most people will ever see in their lifetime. Tight squeezes, vertical drops, low air pockets, long crawls where the ceiling scraped your helmet and the floor pressed into your ribs. I was used to all of it. Caves never scared me. Not the darkness, not the isolation, not the way sound behaves strangely underground. If anything, caves felt familiar, predictable, safe, in a way that's hard to explain unless you've been in them often. And fear was something I associated with other things, not caves. That's what makes this story difficult for me to process, even now. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I started having a recurring dream. It wasn't frequent at first, but it was consistent. I would have it at least twice a year, sometimes more. And no matter how much time passed, the dream was always exactly the same. The first few times, I didn't realize it was recurring. It felt like a normal nightmare. But after a while, something changed. I began to recognize it while I was still inside it. I would know I was dreaming, but I couldn't change anything. I couldn't wake myself up early. I couldn't alter what happened. I could only move forward. The dream always began the same way. I was inside a cave. Not a specific cave I recognized, but one that felt real. The stone texture was right. The air felt damp and heavy. My footsteps echoed softly, distorted in the way sound always is underground. I was standing near the floor of a chamber, and in front of me was a small hole in the ground. Not a vertical drop, but a narrow opening leading down. I would crouch and enter it every time. Inside was a low corridor, maybe 10 to 15 feet long. It was narrow, only a few feet high, forcing me to hunch or crawl. The walls were rough limestone, pale and uneven. The floor sloped gently downward. And at the end of the corridor, it always turned left. Right at that turn was a stop sign. Not mounted, not upright, just a bent red stop sign, like someone had ripped off the top portion and thrown it there. It was scratched, dirty, and partially buried in sediment. It didn't belong there, and that made it stand out even more. It felt deliberate, like a warning placed by someone who knew exactly what was ahead. Every time I saw it, fear would hit me, and every time I would keep going. Even when I knew what was coming. Even when I remembered the ending. Even when I was aware I was dreaming. I would always turn left and move past the sign. After the turn, the corridor would begin to descend more steeply. The ceiling rose, the walls widened, and the passage opened into a massive vertical chamber. The path spiraled downward along the edge, forming a corkscrew that wrapped around the pit. At this point, the dream always became slightly blurry, like my vision couldn't fully focus on everything at once. But the details were still there. But they were always the same. Trash was scattered along the walls. Bottles, wrappers, scraps of metal, things that didn't belong underground. Some were embedded into the stone, as if they had been there for a very long time. Below me was the pit itself, leading down to a curved floor I could barely make out. And at the bottom, there were shapes. They were never clearly defined. Sometimes they looked like animals, sometimes like people, sometimes like something else entirely. They moved slowly, or unnaturally, as if they didn't obey the same rules of motion as everything else. And then I would see my family, my parents, my brother, sometimes extended family too. They were all there, each one restrained or held by one of the things. I could hear them screaming. I could see them struggling. And one by one they were tortured and killed. Every time. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't look away. I was forced to watch all of it, helpless, or frozen in place on the spiral path above them. After the last one was gone, there would be a pause. Just a few seconds. Silence, except for my own breathing. Then I would feel it. Not see it at first, but feel it. Everything in the chamber would turn toward me. The shapes, the presence, whatever was down there, and I would wake up. Not gently, not with a scream, not bolting upright like a typical nightmare. It felt like being shoved backward, like something physically forced me out of the dream, like I had stayed too long in a place I wasn't supposed to be. This dream followed me for years. From childhood into my teens, it kept coming back. Always identical, always unstoppable, always ending the same way. I told one friend about it once, sometime before I turned 15. I didn't go into detail. I just said I had a recurring cave nightmare that really bothered me. Talking about it felt wrong, like saying it out loud gave it more weight. Then came the trip that changed everything. My father decided to take us to some caves we hadn't visited before. One of them was called Dog Drop. The name came from a story that someone either threw a dog into it or a coyote fell in and was later found. Either way, it wasn't comforting. The entrance to Dog Drop was a roughly 30-foot vertical rappel straight down. A clean drop into darkness. My brother and I went down first while my father stayed at the top. At the bottom, there was a hole in the ground. The moment I saw it, something inside me tightened. I didn't know why. I had been in tighter places, deeper places, darker places. But this was different. A heavy unease settled in my chest as I followed my brother toward the opening. The further I went, the worse it felt. Then I looked up, and I saw it. The same corridor, the same low ceiling, the same left turn, the same wall texture, and at the corner, the same trash. Bottles scattered exactly where they had been in my dream. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. Nausea hit me hard. My heart raced. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out, to leave immediately, to not take another step forward. I felt watched. Not like someone nearby, like something deeper, something aware. I froze. I must have made some noise because my brother turned around and asked what was wrong. I could barely speak, but I managed to say I wanted to leave. Now. Immediately. I climbed out as fast as I could. My brother followed without question. We didn't explore anything else. We didn't talk about it. We packed up and left. I never went back. I never will. I didn't tell anyone what I actually saw. I just said I wasn't feeling well. Everyone accepted that explanation, and before long, they forgot about it entirely. but I didn't. What makes it worse is what happened after. I never had the dream again. For years, it had come back consistently, twice a year, sometimes more. And after that day, it stopped completely, like it had reached its conclusion, like whatever loop I was trapped in had closed. I still remember every detail, and when I think about it, I feel the same fear. Not panic, not anxiety, something else, something that feels external, like the fear doesn't belong entirely to me. And that's the part I can't explain. Sorry to interrupt for just a moment. If you're new here, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to Sleepy Shadows for daily calm horror stories made for late nights and sleep. You can also turn on notifications so you don't miss a new story when the night gets quiet and the shadows return. Now, let's continue. I lived in an old apartment back in 2002, the kind of place that looked ordinary from the outside, but carried a weight you could feel the moment you stepped inside. The building had been constructed in 1900, which meant it was just over 100 years old when I moved in. I remember thinking that was kind of cool at first. Old buildings have character, history, stories baked into the walls. At least that's what I told myself. The apartment itself wasn't large, but it was laid out simply, and the living room and kitchen were toward the front, closer to the main hallway. Those spaces felt normal, comfortable. I could sit in the living room and watch TV, cook in the kitchen, move around without any sense of unease. Nothing felt wrong there. But the bathroom and the bedroom were different. From the very beginning, there was something about those rooms that made my skin crawl. It wasn't dramatic fear. Not at first. It was more like a constant awareness, like being in a room where someone had just stopped talking the moment you walked in. I always felt watched in those spaces, especially in the bedroom, and the feeling became much worse if the closet door was open. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just nerves, just my imagination reacting to an unfamiliar place. Old buildings make noises, pipes creak, floors settle, shadows fall strangely. After a while, those unnerving feelings faded into something more manageable. Not gone, but dulled. Like background noise you learn to live with. I settled into a routine. I felt safe enough in the bedroom, but only if the door was locked. That became a habit quickly. Locking the bedroom door felt necessary, even though I couldn't explain why. Once it was locked, I could relax enough to sleep. Without it, I felt exposed. Then came the first night that truly scared me. I was dead asleep, deep enough that dreams hadn't even started yet. Suddenly, a loud bang exploded against my bedroom door. Not a knock, not a tap, a full, heavy impact, like someone had slammed into it with their body or kicked it with all their strength. I bolted awake, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I just lay there staring at the door, waiting for it to happen again. Nothing did. Eventually, fear gave way to adrenaline, and adrenaline gave way to anger and confusion. I got out of bed and checked the apartment, and every window was closed. Every lock was secure. The front door was still chained from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry. No one was there. I stood in the hallway, listening, half expecting to hear breathing or footsteps. The apartment was silent. I went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easily after that. The closet in the bedroom had always bothered me. From the first day, I hated it. I hated opening it. I hated standing near it. And I absolutely hated leaving the door open. There was no logical reason for it. It was just a normal closet. Wooden door, hanging rod, storage space. But in my head, whenever I thought about that closet, I imagined gasping sounds, like someone struggling to breathe, like shallow, desperate inhales and rattling exhales. I never actually heard anything out loud, but the thought was so vivid it felt real. Because of that, the closet door stayed shut. Always. About a month after the night of the bang, something happened that changed everything. Again, I was dead asleep. This time there was no noise to wake me. Instead, I became aware of a heavy pressure on my body. It felt like something was holding me down, pressing into my chest and shoulders. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even take a full breath. The room was pitch black. I couldn't see anything at all. But I knew, without seeing, that something was standing over me. That certainty was absolute. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't a guess. It was knowledge. Panic flooded my body, but I was trapped inside it. My limbs wouldn't respond. My voice was gone. All I could do was lie there and feel the weight pinning me in place. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I wanted to turn my head, to look, but I couldn't. When I finally managed to move my arm, it felt like breaking free from deep water. I reached blindly for the bedside lamp and flipped it on. The light flooded the room instantly. There was no one there. No shadow retreating, no shape dissolving. Nothing. That moment terrified me more than if I had actually seen something. After that night, I couldn't sleep in the dark anymore. I kept a lamp on every night. Even then, sleep came in shallow bursts. That experience scared the life out of me, and something inside me shifted permanently. The feeling of being watched intensified after that. It wasn't just me anymore. Friends would come over and comment on it without being prompted, or they'd step into the bathroom and come back out uneasy, saying it felt like someone was watching them. Some laughed it off afterward, but the discomfort was real. You could see it on their faces. The apartment felt heavier. The air felt thick, especially in the bedroom and bathroom. The living room still felt fine, like a neutral zone. But the deeper you went into the apartment, the worse it got. Eventually, it became too much. When I had the chance to move into another unit in the building, I didn't hesitate. I packed up and got out as quickly as I could. The moment I closed the door behind me for the last time, I felt relief. Real relief. Like leaving a place that didn't want you there. After I moved out, several other people rented that apartment. None of them stayed long. Months at most. Sometimes less. I noticed the pattern, but I didn't say anything. I became friendly with the building manager over time. One day, I told him that I felt that apartment was haunted, but he laughed it off, brushing it aside like a joke. I didn't push the issue. I didn't need validation at the time. I already knew what I had felt. Years later, the building went through renovations. The old apartment was being updated, repainted, refreshed. The building manager was working in there, and the owner of the building was present as well. I decided to stop by and take a look. The apartment looked nicer, brighter, cleaner. And strangely, it didn't feel as creepy as it once had. Whatever heaviness had been there seemed muted, buried under new paint and repairs. I started talking with the building owner casually. We chatted about the renovations, the history of the place. And then, without any build-up, he mentioned something that made my stomach drop. He said that a former tenant had committed suicide in that apartment, in the closet, by hanging themselves. He added, almost as an afterthought, and that the original designer of the building had lived in that apartment as well, and had died there. When I heard that, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel shocked. What I felt was validation. Everything clicked into place. The closet, the gasping, the pressure, the fear, the watching presence. It all made a terrible kind of sense. What I experienced wasn't dismissed anymore, even in my own mind. It was real to me. and it always had been. Even now, when I think back on that apartment, I remember exactly how it felt to stand in that bedroom with the door locked, the closet closed, the lamp glowing softly through the night. And I remember knowing, deep down, that something was there with me, watching. When my grandparents bought their house, they were preparing to raise a family of 10. It was an old house, larger than it looked from the outside, the kind of place built when families were expected to grow into every corner of it. My grandparents needed space, so almost immediately after moving in, my grandfather began inspecting the upstairs, looking for ways to open things up. That's when he found the wall. It didn't look obviously fake at first. It wasn't loose or hollow in a way that immediately raised suspicion. But something about it didn't sit right with him. It didn't line up the way the other walls did. The measurements felt off. Eventually, curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to tear it down to make more room for the growing family. Behind that wall was a small, hidden space. Inside were children's clothes and toys, not stored neatly, not boxed or labeled. They were scattered, abandoned, like someone had been interrupted in the middle of living there. Tiny shirts, shoes, playthings left where they had last been used. The whole thing felt rushed, like whoever owned them had walked away suddenly and never came back. No one could explain why they were there. There were no records of children being associated with that space. No clear reason for a wall to have been built over a room like that. My grandparents removed everything, expanded the area, and did their best to move on. But even after the renovation, the upstairs never felt right. Years later, my mom would tell me stories about living in that house as a child. She stayed in one of the upstairs bedrooms, the same area where the hidden wall had been. She said that sometimes, when she was sitting quietly in her room, she would hear something moving along the walls. Not footsteps, not scratching. It sounded like wallpaper being torn slowly away, inch by inch, circling the room. Or the sound would travel along the walls, wrapping around her, like something pacing just out of sight. She would sit frozen on her bed, too scared to move, listening as it made its way around her again and again. Nothing was ever there when she checked. When my mom eventually moved out, my aunt took that same room. The experiences didn't stop. In fact, they became harder to explain away. My aunt would hang pictures on the walls, family photos, decorations, things to make the room feel more personal. More than once, she woke up in the morning to find those pictures lying on her chest, not fallen beside the bed, not scattered on the floor, placed on her. The frames were intact, the hooks were still attached. There was no obvious reason they should have come loose, and certainly no explanation for how they ended up where they did. She stopped hanging things above her bed after that. My cousins grew up in the house too. Oh, and they have their own stories. Late at night, when the house was quiet, they would hear footsteps coming up the stairs. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Step by step, climbing higher until the sound stopped right outside their bedroom doors. No one ever knocked. No one ever entered. When they worked up the courage to open the door, the hallway was empty. The house would be still, like nothing had ever been there at all. As for me, even as a kid, I never liked going upstairs in that house. I couldn't tell you exactly why. I just knew it felt wrong. The temperature always seemed colder up there, no matter the season. The air felt heavy, stale, like it didn't move the way it should. Even now, as an adult, I avoid that space. I don't linger. I don't explore. I don't sit alone up there. The feeling hasn't faded with time. If anything, it's become more defined. Less fear, more certainty. And the strangest part is that the house follows me even when I'm not there. I still have dreams that take place upstairs. Not vague dreams, but detailed ones. I know exactly where I am. I know which room I'm standing in. The hallway stretches longer than it should. The corners feel sharper. The shadows deeper. In those dreams, I always feel watched. Like something remembers me. Like something has been waiting. I don't know who those children were. I don't know why their things were hidden behind a wall. I don't know what stayed behind when that space was sealed up. But whatever it was, it never left. It grew up with my family, and sometimes it still visits. This happened while I was at university, during one of those nights that started out completely ordinary. There was nothing strange about the evening at first. Just me and a couple of friends hanging out, drinking, laughing, doing exactly what students do when they have nowhere else to be the next morning. Eventually, we ran out of booze. It was late enough that most of the local shops were closed, and after checking our phones, we realized there was only one real option left, and the nearest 24-hour supermarket was about a mile away. Not far enough to be annoying, not close enough to be convenient. But it was either that, or call it a night, and none of us were ready for that yet. So we decided to walk. The route between our dorms and the supermarket was painfully dull. Just long stretches of suburban housing, row after row of near-identical homes. Same brickwork, same hedges, same driveways, and the kind of neighborhood that feels slightly unreal even in daylight because everything looks copied and pasted. At night, it was worse. Streetlights cast yellow pools of light that barely reached the pavement. Most houses were dark, curtains drawn, cars sitting quietly in driveways. There was no traffic. No people, just the sound of our footsteps and our voices drifting too loudly through the empty streets. About halfway along one of the roads, something broke the pattern. On our left, where there absolutely should not have been one, was a field. It wasn't small, either. It opened up suddenly between two houses, stretching back farther than the light could reach. In the middle of it was a large campfire, flames rising high enough to illuminate everything around it in warm orange light. Dotted throughout the field were lanterns, glowing softly, creating pockets of brightness in the darkness. And there were people, a lot of them. Some were standing around the fire, but others were sitting or moving in loose groups. I could hear music, but it wasn't coming from speakers. It sounded live. Instruments being played by hand, strings, maybe drums. There was laughter, conversation, the general noise of people enjoying themselves. The strangest part was the horses. Several people were riding them slowly around the fire, not in a rushed way, but calmly, almost ceremonially. The horses moved smoothly, their silhouettes passing through the firelight, on tack and reins glinting faintly. The whole scene felt old. Not in a nostalgic way, in a way that didn't belong to our time at all. The lanterns, the fire, the horses, the music. It didn't look modern. It didn't look like students messing around. It looked like something from a different era that had somehow been dropped into the middle of a modern housing estate. We slowed down as we passed it, all three of us glancing over without really speaking. No one from the field acknowledged us, or no one looked our way. It was like we weren't there. Still, nothing felt threatening, just deeply out of place. After we passed it, the houses started again immediately. Same street, same pavement, same streetlights. Within seconds, it was like the field had never existed at all. We walked on for another 5 minutes or so, the silence settling back in around us. That's when one of my friends finally said something. He mentioned how strange that gathering had been. how it didn't make any sense to see something like that there. The moment he said it, my other friend and I both reacted, because we'd been thinking the exact same thing. None of us could explain it, but we all felt it. That low-level unease you get when your brain tells you something doesn't fit. Curiosity got the better of us. We decided to turn around and take another look. There was no complicated navigation involved. No guessing, but we literally turned around and walked back the way we had just come, retracing our steps exactly. We expected to see the glow of the fire before anything else. But the street was dark. When we reached the spot where the field should have been, there was nothing there. No fire, no lanterns, no horses, no people, no field, just more houses. The same kind of houses we'd been walking past all night, lined up neatly, uninterrupted, as if there had never been an opening there at all. We stood there for a moment, confused, looking back and forth between the houses, trying to work out where we could have gone wrong. But we hadn't gone wrong. We were absolutely certain this was the same road. Still thinking we must have missed something, we walked up and down the neighboring streets too. We checked every possible corner, every stretch of pavement where a field might logically exist. There was nothing, not even a hint of disturbed ground, no open space. There's no sign that anything like what we'd seen could have fit there. It was as if the entire scene had been erased and replaced seamlessly with rows of houses. We stood there for a long time, talking through it, trying to rationalize what we'd experienced. We weren't drunk. We'd had some drinks, sure, but we were walking, talking clearly, fully aware of our surroundings. All three of us had seen the same thing, heard the same sounds, felt the same sense of wrongness. Eventually, and we gave up and continued to the supermarket, the mood permanently changed. The walk back to the dorms afterward felt longer, quieter. None of us joked as much. We kept glancing down side streets and between houses, half expecting something else to appear where it didn't belong. Nothing ever did. To this day, I have no idea what we saw that night. I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it went. And I don't know how something so vivid, so specific, could vanish without leaving even the smallest trace behind. But I know it happened, because three of us saw it, and none of us has ever been able to forget it. If you're still here, it means these stories didn't just fade away, they stayed with you. Each one was shared to feel real, quiet, and close. Moments that could happen to anyone. Moments where something felt wrong, or nearly did. If you'd like to keep listening to stories that linger long after they're told, consider subscribing to Sleepy Shadows. There are more waiting in the dark, and not all of them disappear by morning. Good night.